Greetings, class. Sigoli, narioliwas. Skanagoga, skanago. Greetings, what is the news? Are you with peace? I am with peace. It is such an honor to be with y'all. Week 3. So truly grateful to learn from each and every one of you as we are here in restorative justice and Indigenous communities. Really appreciating the class GroupMe, and I'm really appreciating each and every one of your responses in our module 2 as you're just deconstructing and reconstructing different ideas of what you want to put forward and how do we build our best, most just and equitable society? How do we build a restorative society? What are and just your reflections. So they're really powerful. I want to share some of those ideas here. Sylvie, I loved your idea of that quote you shared, what people deem just in a particular era. What people deem just in a particular era plumbs the deepest level of their culture, expresses the basic principles attached to human relationships. I believe that the Chief Justice Robert Yazzie quote you're sharing is just amazing, truly powerful. Xiao, I really appreciated your insight as well too. I love your idea of what that desired future can look like in the United States and how we contribute to this realized society. And that John Bailey quote of the future is ancient. That was really cool as well too. Bessie, always appreciate learning from you. Love that idea of banishment. And I've heard strong arguments for and against this as well too, but recognizing this within how it's described in the book chapter for the Haudenosaunee. And I really love your question you posed. Should we not speak of the paradigm shift we dream of in order to build it, instead of pointing out only what is wrong without dreaming of something more loving? I love that idea. It's easy to tear things down, but it's the real challenge and the real need is what do we reconstruct? What are we putting forth in its place? What are these positive and loving things and this holistic care that we're looking to encompass and looking to work towards? Jackie, always a pleasure to learn from you as well too. I love that point you make about Jagonase, and yes, Jagonase, she has different spellings of her name. I like the one you use there with the K, as oftentimes for the Haudenosaunee. Our Ks are pronounced like Gs when you hear me say Sigoli, and you see it spelled like S-H-E-K-O-L-I, the K being like a G, like kunolúkhwa, also spelled with Ks, and uses the English G sound, but for the Oneida, it's just different uses of those letters for the Haudenosaunee. But love that part out, being the mother of nations. Really appreciate you pointing out how the Dene are a matriarchal society as well too. So just some really grateful for your insights. Randy, grateful to learn alongside you. Love the insight of talking about bringing it to the healthcare system. And I very much agree that our healthcare and our justice system is very much interrelated. And I really appreciate that honest reflection on our society in the United States. And your feeling about how far off we are from being invested in a community members' well-being as much as an individual's rights. And just that need for reframing and a need for movement towards that place. Samuel, always appreciate your insight. Great video here. I liked you and others had pointed out these influence of Christian values influencing the United States justice system. It's also pointing out the text of this Euro-Canadian justice system, even though we're supposed to have the separation of church and state. I appreciate the distinction that people in the West may confuse justice solely with order and how it can be more than that as well too, in a loving and holistic way. And I love that point about spirituality, feelings, and opinions, and how can this be incorporated into our legal system? As oftentimes we like you noted, we leave those things out. So excellent work, Samuel. Really appreciate learning from you. Rebecca, thank you for your video. I do agree that people need to be more intimately involved and participate in the events taking part around us. I love that thought in action. And I love that idea of how we move into a place of healing with justice. I like that commentary there. Zachary, fantastic work. Again, talking about that Euro-Canadian framework, running contrary to the supposed notion of church and states. And your articulation of the system is functioning exactly how it has been designed definitely gives me the chills as well too, as we think about the Euro-Canadian models of justice. And also I think about in the United States as well too. And just a drastic need for change. As Danielle Sered talks about, our systems have gotten us as far as we've gotten. If we want to go somewhere different, then we need to reimagine or reconstruct new spaces or new opportunities to do so. So I love that, the need for holistic, contextual, and cyclical way of understanding. Love that. Alana, always great to learn from your insight as well too. Loved your point as well too of the importance of intergenerational resiliency, intergenerational love, and intergenerational strength. So important as well too. And it was so powerful reading your words as well too, looking at that Western justice system of punishment and the indigenous justice systems for healing, and your articulation of how oftentimes from a Western model for restorative justice, they'll be simply extracting the components that can fit. And I have definitely seen that happen all too often. And I literally wrote up a response about this paragraph, how it feels like a circle is going into a square and how so much is left out, and like all those different things. And then after I wrote that, I literally read yours about how that was the same thing of a circle going into a much smaller square, and your articulation of points, which was much more eloquent than mine. But I was like, wow, that's same frequency of thought there, but definitely agree. And just the need really to take in, to truly give honor and to truly do the system justice of what restorative justice is to lean into the spiritual, is to lean into the holistic. Is Don Coyhis, who's a Mohican member of the Mohican Nation, talks about the 18-inch journey from our head to our heart is the longest journey a human being will make in our lifetime. And I definitely find that to be true, especially as people, the more formal we get in our education, the more professional we get in our careers, it's almost like we've been trained and told to kind of let those things go, let those things kind of die off a long time ago. And we really need to breathe life into those things, into spirituality, into our connection and our interrelatedness. That these are not just the nice fluffy things, but these are the core elements of what restorative justice is, in my opinion, as well. So great points, Alana. Always great to learn from you. AJ, it's a pleasure. Really resonate with your importance of the idea of naming things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. How Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland has helped recently rename over 650 sites across the United States. Oftentimes, these were removing derogatory terms and racial slurs. That you can see it in the article as well too. And in case you or anyone else didn't know, that 26 out of our 50 states, United States, derive their name from native words. So you can look that up as well too and learn more about which those states are and how they get their names. We'll talk about that in a minute. Joellen, I always appreciate your courage and your bravery. It's so phenomenal to learn from you, how willing and how open you are in terms of modeling your bravery and courage, allowing other people to do the same as well too. So I just really appreciate all your wisdom and insight, and just those comparisons you're making between like history of Black communities and Native communities and different struggles, and just the importance for breaking that cycle of violence with healing. I think that's just so critically important. And I think you model that just so incredibly well for all of us. So I know I can't speak on behalf of anyone other than myself, but I'm just saying what a gift it is to have you in this class, and what a gift it is to be able to learn from you, Joellen. Thank you so much. And Carolina, it's really great to learn from you. Really appreciate how you resonated with the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace. And I totally agree, the point about the importance and need for education about Native history and the culture of Native peoples with the reverence and respect in order for restorative justice to be able to take hold. I think that's an excellent point. Really well said. Truly grateful to be able to learn from you, Carolina. So thank you all for your responses. It's been wonderful to continue to learn from each and every one of you. And let's continue learning now. I have a brief PowerPoint that I wanted to share with you all here. So I'm going to tell you all where we're going today. Let's get there. I'm going to talk about some outcomes and guidelines from my cousin, Eddie Cornelius Grosskopf, and how she's been using this practice. Talk about some current events, legislation, how to make change, some influential leaders, learning outcomes for this module, videos to watch, your reading excerpts, paying the land, some musical references for you, and a quote about how we are all connected. So some outcomes and guidelines. I shared this in the GroupMe, but I just want to share it again. Just this idea of this extremely powerful experiential learning. You all can pause and take a moment to look at this if you haven't yet. One I really want to look at right here is guideline number 12. Respect and value others' points of worldviews. 12. Send loving thoughts and feelings to each speaker during their time of speaking. I love that so much, right? We talk about that. That key, as like Alana talked about, that circle being cut out to a much smaller square, and how that need for that those ideas of how our loving thoughts and feelings, like those things matter as well too, in terms of how we are listening and how we are in community, not listening to judge, but listening to understand, listening to love. I'm told in American Sign Language, the word to understand, it's like a light bulb going off in your head, like I understand you. And there's different tribes that have used different sign language over the years. Then there was the Plains tribes that would use a specific type of sign language. And for these tribes to understand would be a gesture from your heart coming up and then out, connecting like a bridge to the person you're talking to. So the idea to understand someone is like, I understand you. And this idea is coming in this native perspective from this Plains sign language of coming from your heart, and this American Sign Language of coming from your head, this notion of understanding, which makes all the difference in the world if you're understanding someone with your head versus your heart. I do think that matters a great deal. So I want you to engage with that as we get into this practice, is think about that, what it means to be a restorative justice practitioner, as we think about appreciation versus appropriation. And I think that the key for appreciation is to acknowledge and educate and honor. For me, I think that it's appreciating when we talk about all the different historical uses and all the different tribes that have used restorative justice and still use restorative justice. I think for me, it becomes appropriation when we do not acknowledge, we do not educate, and we do not honor, and we say that restorative justice starts in 1980 and that this is not a native practice. That to me is completely appropriation. I think that oftentimes, maybe with good intention, people don't want to disrespect, or they don't feel like they don't have enough authority, or they don't have enough knowledge. Maybe they themselves are not a native practitioner, or maybe they are, but maybe they feel like that they just they don't want to dishonor the practice by saying that it is a native practice. But to me, I feel like we are dishonoring it by not truly recognizing its origins. So I think that if you want to appreciate this practice, I think you just acknowledge, educate, and honor where it comes from, and just realizing that we're all lifelong learners. We're all learning, and that there's never a finish line. That we're always continuously learning, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually every single day. No amount of degrees in the walls or different things, or no amount of years of age or different things. That we are all lifelong learners. So I love that very much, and I love you all very much, people. So kunolúkhwa, I love you in Oneida. This is from fairly recently. We're talking about within the last year, when the Pope came to give an apology in Canada. We think about that, what is an apology. And if you ever see on Netflix Explained, there's one of the shows there. It's one of the episodes is talking about an apology, and it talks about like restorative justice for about half of it as well too. It's pretty interesting, and it shows Daniel Surratt in there in that video. But it talks about like kind of what makes up an apology, and what does this mean. I think that it totally is important, and I think for healing to take place, some people an apology matters, some people not as much, and other things need to take place. So even when I think about the papal bull from 1493, this doctrine of discovery, where any lands inhabited by non-Christian peoples be considered terra nullius, or land belonging to no one, able to be discovered. So that again, we've talked about this before, but the doctrine of discovery cited as the Supreme Court ruling in 2005. So again, this is a very active doctrine, and we talked about before how we were supposed to have separation of church and state, and yet it is still an active doctrine. So I would encourage, if anyone has, if the Pope is watching this, or if anyone has the ability to communicate with the Pope, of saying, please rescind the papal bull from 1493. This is still an active and very live and very harmful to Native peoples and to people all over the world, that we need to rescind this, that this is still active to this day. So in order for restorative justice to take place, and this is definitely a need for an action that I cannot speak on behalf of all Native peoples. We are not a monolith. I can speak from my own personal experience. I think this would bring I think this would bring some healing, and I think that it would bring it would change everything. The legal construct, it would make a big deal as well too. This right here, this is House Resolution 5444, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act. This was put forth in June 15th, 2022. And when I was updating this today, this PowerPoint, I was really excited to see how much farther it had come along. And my heart snapped in half and broke, and I realized, wow, it still has been sitting in the same place since June of 2022, that nothing else has happened to this commission, to this as it's been presented. So this bill, the idea is that it'd be looking at Truth and Healing Commission from the Indian boarding schools. And if you're familiar with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, it would be modeling a little bit off of that as well too, and be able to hear some of these stories and trying to go through this reconciliation process, this restorative healing process, or having at least starting the process to be able to grieve, as I've talked about before. For many people, especially here in what we consider Turtle Island, or for what is now the United States or Canada, Mexico, South America, the idea is that many people indigenous peoples haven't really had a chance to grieve certain things that they have gone through, that continually had been on the run or trying to hide or assimilate, or kind of to get by. So the idea is that it's really important to be able to hear these stories, and it's not easy. I know, like in my own family, it's a lot easier said than done when I can tell a class about different things that have happened. But when I'm like having these conversations with my family, who maybe they had never heard about some of the horrific things, maybe they did know about it, but it triggers something in them. So it's a lot easier said than done. But I do believe that we are stronger together, and I do believe that healing can take place through our conversation and counseling, and that we are stronger together, like the peacemaker and the arrows, that one can be broken, but together we cannot be broken. So that being said, if you are passionate, and if you want to help push forward, the first is the House Resolution 5444, which is in the House of Representatives. And then within the Senate is Senate Bill 2907. And again, that's been presented in June 2022, still sitting there as well too. This Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding Schools Act. And this would be to further explore some of the schools. And there was over 450 Indian boarding schools here in the United States, over 150 Indian residential schools in Canada. I'm not sure the exact number, how many have been searched in Canada, the Indian residential schools. I want to say somewhere between 9 and 12, if not more. To my understanding, in the United States, we've explored Carlisle, so just the one so far out of them, with about 449 more to go. This is just a book that my cousin Eddie had made. We talked about Eddie earlier as well too. This is a picture right here on the right to put it into context about these children hiding under the bed when the Indian agents would come, so they wouldn't have to be taken away from their homes. And we talked about my great-grandfather, Anderson Cornelius. This is the notes here from the archives. Talking about Mr. Henderson. Anderson Cornelius is a deserter from the country and should be disciplined accordingly. That would be after he ran away from school. And then I think that was the first time, I believe. He ended up running away a second time. As you can see here, my dear Madame, I regret to advise you that your son, Anderson, deserted from his outing here on July 4th and that we have not succeeded in locating him. Hoping that you will let me hear if you hear him arrive at your home or learn where he is. I remain very, very truly yours. Some interesting choice of words there. As he writes to my great-great-grandmother there, that note. But deserter from a country should be disciplined accordingly. You know, my great-grandpa, he would go on to serve in World War I as well too, in 1918. The idea that even before he was a US citizen in 1924, that was over 12,000 Native people that served in World War I, even before they were US citizens. And when I asked many of my relatives, you know, why they also served, out of my 12 great aunts and uncles, 8 of them served in the different military branches, in different services of defense. And when I asked them, they said, you know, it doesn't matter who's in charge. The idea is that you protect the people, you protect this land, like that's your responsibility. And it's also a factoid, Native peoples have the highest per capita representation in the military than any other ethnicity. So even if it's not the largest numbers, but by per capita population, like the percentage of representation would be the highest representation of any ethnicity for service. So that being said, the idea was that he was doing these sacrifices of serving in World War I, my great grandpa, of just hoping that someone down the line would be able to have those responsibilities and have those rights that he was really fighting for. So that is not lost on me today. So I definitely hear all your words of what it was it look like to build a more just and more equitable society, a more healing and holistic and spiritual society. So I'm in it to win it, people. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm working on it. Find your representative. So if you don't know already, you can Google this, look at this link right here, house.gov representatives/find-your-representative. And you can put in your zip code here. If you don't know who your House representative is, you can let them know that you support, if you do, the Truth and Healing Commission for the boarding school policy. If you want to look at that act and have that brought before your representatives, definitely email them, notify them, call them. They work for you, that they are your representatives. So definitely let them know and remind them that as well too. That is how it works. We talked about the importance of naming, and Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland renaming 650 places to remove derogatory terms. Those 26 states that were named by Native Americans. Pretty amazing, the influence. We talk about how do we create change. There's this person named Ken Wilber, and he has this idea called integral theory. I learned about it during my PhD. This idea, if you want to make change, you need to change the way people think about something on an individual level. He has 4 quadrants here. Let's look at the quadrants, and we'll talk about how you make change. So quadrant 1 is called the I, in the subjective quadrant in the top left. These are your thoughts, emotions, memories, states of minds, perceptions, immediate sensations. How do people think about an issue? For here, what we think about, how do we think about the Indian boarding schools in the United States, for instance? How do people think about these in general? Or is this uncomfortable? Do people want healing about it? Do people know about it? What is this thought process? The it is the material body or anything you can see or touch in time and space. These are usually people's thoughts or actions. These are people's actions or words. So it's like the physical that you can see, the it objective on an individual level. That's in that top right. You go to the bottom right. Now you're moving more towards the collective level, and this the it's, also known as the interobjective. These are the systems, networks, technology, government, and the natural environment. I'm told these are our rules. These are our laws. So what are the policies in place? What are the acts in place for this example, around the Indian Boarding Schools Act about what are those current laws now? And currently we just have a proposal in place. And the intersubjective quadrant in the bottom left is this idea of how do you make a change on a cultural level? What are these shared values, meanings, language, relationships, and cultural background? So the idea is if you want to make a change on a cultural level, that would impact the laws that are made, which would impact people's individual actions. And it all starts with how do people think about something on an individual level? That's how you create change in any regard. And this is just one example of a theory of it, but I found it to be a good articulation of point. This is the House Concurrent Resolution 331 from 1988, a little bit going back to last week's module, but this is just recognizing that the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political systems developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. And if you grew up in the state of New York, then this was part of your state education. But if you did not, then this was probably not part of your state education growing up as well too. Yeah, in the state of New York, their middle school students recreate a building of a longhouse, which is a traditional Haudenosaunee living structure. And again, this is in stark contrast to a state where, for instance, I live here in California. And in fourth grade, they have students build these missions. And the mission systems, they look like they're very beautiful. But in reality, they were actually built by indigenous enslaved people and are the mass burial sites of indigenous murdered people. So each one of these missions are actually just mass burial sites for California Native people who were forced indigenous enslaved people and then were put in mass burial sites. So I would think it's phenomenal if we wanted to create real change. Nelson Mandela says, if you want to change the world, change education. I think it'd be so important, as pointed out by Carolina as well too, and I'd pointed out by others. If we expect people to be able to take on this change of this holistic and this idea of the spiritual and interrelated, I think it's really important to understand the Haudenosaunee notion of the Great Law of Peace. I think it's one great example, as are many other tribal nations examples. And then also recognizing how the Great Law of Peace influences our country and the roots of the United States, as oftentimes we talk about law and the idea of upholding the Constitution. Where does the Constitution come from, though? What is that original first draft, which would be the Great Law of Peace wampum, which is the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace. So I think that if we want to figure out where we're going, as Xiao put it, the future is ancient, and the idea that we need to look to our past to learn from it as well too, to understand what were those original ideas of those core values of what our country was supposed to be when it was being formed, and how can we really seek after that ideal and make it better than ever. This is a picture of myself with the Chief Warren Lyons, faith keeper of the Onondaga Nation, and I heard him articulate before. We often talk about our rights, but what about our responsibilities? And he talks about the Bill of Rights, and he said, what if this was called the Bill of Responsibilities instead? Or what if you had a Bill of Responsibilities as opposed to just a Bill of Rights? Phenomenal leader, phenomenal human being. Some other great leaders here. The first California Native person to be elected to the California State Assembly, Jordan Ramos, a Serrano Cahuilla person. The first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, Wilma Mankiller, 1945 to 2010, of the Cherokee Nation. Some other leaders here include Winona LaDuke. We have here Russell Means in the top right, Dennis Banks. Bottom left here is Vine Deloria Jr. Next to Vine is Sachi and Littlefeather. Then to the right is Leonard Peltier. He's been one of the longest, if not the longest, political prisoner since 1977 for a crime which he did not commit. And also to his right here is Richard Oakes, Mohawk leader, part of the occupation of Alcatraz, 1969 to 1971. So if you haven't seen the learning outcomes yet, using the example of the Peacemaker Court for the Dene people, to describe the ways in which the Navajo customary law protects Dene culture, and analyze the potential of Ocheti Sakawan Oyete truth and reconciliation process in South Dakota. And with the Dene, those aspects, I think a lot of you all have already mentioned that in the readings and different ideas. The Chief Justice Robert Yazzie talks about one of the biggest insults you could say to somebody in this Dene culture is that this person acts as if they have no relatives. The idea of seeing everything as interrelated, the importance of having support people as well too, part of the circle as well, for accountability as well, the importance of taking this hierarchical system, this vertical system that we usually have for justice, and flipping it horizontally, literally making the courtroom a circle process as well too. So you'll see this in the videos right here as well too. trying to get, this is just a trailer for tribal justice. So as soon as possible, hopefully I'll have it either updated to this module or a future module, the actual documentary of tribal justice. So you can get an idea of what tribal justice looks like in different communities happening in this day in a very modern context. We have some different excerpts here from the readings talking about healing. I like this here. Healing is about being aligned with the natural spiritual law. That alignment can happen swiftly, but the healing process itself takes a long time. The major part of unresolved suffering that needs to be healed actually belongs to the ancestors. By healing themselves, each generation heals their ancestors. I like this as well too. Another excerpt here. A healthy person has something to get up for in the morning. That one always resonates with me a great deal. Just some excerpts here from your readings. Looking at the Oceti-Sakowin Essential Understandings and Standards. This is from the Oceti-Sakowin Oyate Truth and Reconciliation Process in South Dakota. This is from Lakota scholar Dr. Craig Howe in 2010. The hope is that citizens who are well educated about the Oceti-Sakowin history and culture will be more likely to make better decisions in the arena of Indian issues and to get along better with one another. This really ties to the point that Carolina talked about as well too, that the importance of knowing history and understanding that to really better understand the full process as well too, of perhaps a restorative or a healing process, a healing circle. You can pause and look at this as well too, but just looking at it at a glance, looking at land and environment, identity and resiliency, culture and language, kinship and harmony, oral tradition and history, sovereignty and treaties, way of life and development. Just one way that of doing this as well too, that if the Oceti-Sakowin can help understand their history and culture is put forth by Dr. Craig Howe, this Lakota scholar, that hopefully this would lead to better understanding ourselves, our culture, and where we come from, particularly for these Lakota people. This is an elder of the Omaha tribe here, and this idea of, just for all of you, one of your assignments as well too, is spending 10 minutes out with nature as well too. And the idea that Chief Warren Lyons talks about, that it's not just, it's not like this wilderness, it's not this wild, but the idea that nature is an extension of ourselves, and that we, like a relative, and if we viewed it that way, that we would treat it much differently perhaps. I know for growing up, for part of our Oneida culture, we would refer to the moon as grandmother moon. The sun would be brother, we refer to as brother sun. For the earth, mother earth. When lightning and thunder comes, we call those the uncles. So it's the idea that you have this very kin family relationship with all these things around you. And like Chief Warren Lyons and I just said, that nature is an extension of yourself. If we think about ourselves, we think about our DNA on a molecular level is very similar to the makeup and composition of dirt. The idea that our bodies are 60% water when our planet's roughly 70% water. The idea that we have air that we breathe as well too in our lungs, and the air that's all around us as well too. And the idea of that fire, that heat that we're able to produce as well too. That we're very much, that we are nature as well too, and that we view nature as part of us. And I believe I told you on a previous module here, this idea that for the Yurok tribe in California, that one of their legal experts had argued for personhood of one of their lakes when they're trying to protect this valuable relative. They argued for personhood of a lake in their community, and they won that argument. So Renee Sosi, and I apologize if I mispronounce their name there, an educator and activist. When you're approaching water, you make that petition to water, and you make that tobacco offering, because water is older than we are. That's our elder. Just to reframe and think about next time you see water. I've also heard it said, I remember, I think it's in this book as well too, Painting the Land by Joe Sacco. It looks at the Dene, D-E-N-E, these First Nation people in Canada, and the impact of oil on them as well too. Some fascinating points, and one of them, he's a journalist, but he does it through a graphic novel. And one of the points he makes there is this idea, one of the elders talks about, like, water is very sacred, and the idea that they were told not to put it on the ground, like directly on the ground. So you always have like something on top of it, just to remind you like how sacred that is. And I remember after reading that, it's just something that I practice as well too. It's hard for me to kind of unsee that, unlearn that once I kind of saw that. I just really view water as a very sacred thing. Said in Lakota, Mini Wachoni, water is life. And all the chants that we would say, even I was just out there for a day at the Dakota Access Pipeline, but you can't drink oil, water is life. So anyways, that's a point there as well too, I thought was interesting. and how we pay and your idea of paying the land. That if you were, what if you were to pay respect to the land the same way that you were to pay respect to an elder or a relative? Maybe if you're visiting with a relative you haven't seen in a long time, or a relative you love with a great respect and admiration. That this in this book here, it talks about what if you were to offer it tea, or you were to offer it water to pour some out, or if you were to offer it tobacco as this gift of respect and this gift of reverence and love. And oftentimes I'm told for tobacco, where we hold onto it. My grandma taught me to make requests to the Creator, to ask for guidance to the Creator, and to give thanks to the Creator as well too. So it can be a very powerful medicine, tobacco. Music for you as well too. So if you have Spotify, you can look up this native playlist that's public that I created as well too. So I believe that music can be medicine. I know we didn't spend too much time on it, but Eddie Cornelius Grosskopf, my cousin, in those first outline for Gentle Directions for Life, talks about this idea of the importance of how our words can be medicine as well too. And I love that. I've heard it said by different powwow MCs, these masters of ceremonies at powwows, that our words are medicine. They can either be good medicine, make people feel included, make them feel good, or we can have bad medicine that makes people feel excluded or hurt. This is be careful with your words, be careful with your medicine. So I believe music is medicine as well too. Here's a playlist I put for you in case you're curious at all more about just native culture and ideas, which are from the past, present, and where we're going in the future as well too. And music is a big part of that. One of my favorite DJs and musical groups is they're called the Mohican Nation. They're formerly a Tribe Called Red. This on the right here is myself. I'm on the left, but right my right here is Tim Hill of the Mohawk Nation. He's also known as Tim the Tool Man. So you see him with a little Haudenosaunee Six Nations pouch. This was in Southern California after seeing them perform. Also, he'll perform with Bear Witness from the Cayuga Nation, a DJ in the Mohican Nation. So both them members of the Haudenosaunee, but using their musical talents to help make change, to help bring attention to different issues. There's this documentary I'd highly recommend if you get a chance to watch it. It's called Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World. I believe it's on Amazon Video to rent or buy, and maybe different platforms as well. Really powerful. And one of the people in that is Buffy St. Marie. And she has this, I'm going to paraphrase her words here, but she talks about how oftentimes if you're trying to kind of fight what's the system that's already there, oftentimes it can feel like that you're going to be outmatched or outnumbered or out-resourced. But the idea, if you can work through what's already there, if you can help heal it up, that music can be a powerful way of doing that as well too, and messaging and how we touch people's hearts, minds, and spirits and souls. So I love the ability of music being able to pull the heartstrings. I love that. And we'll finish with this quote here by Dr. Donald Warren, whose Oglala Lakota name is Pedrutik Wakasa, which means medicine man. And I apologize if I mispronounced that there, Dr. Donald Warren, Pedrutik Wakasa. And they say here, let us remember, we all drink from the same stream of consciousness. We are all connected by that same stream of consciousness. We are all related. What we do to each other, we do to ourselves. Act kindly toward my people, for indeed, my people are your people. And with that, people, I wanted to just share our syllabus, just the last reminder of where we're going here. Our readings here for this week as well too. Films to watch, your expectations. Everyone did great. I love those videos or your responses. Either way, I really appreciate learning from you. Do make sure to check in with that community peacemaking circle on our GroupMe, and be sure to spend 10 minutes connecting in nature. Just being a human being and paying respect to those relatives the same way you pay respect to a friend or a loved one. So with that being said, people, I just want to say, Yawanko kunolúkhwa nakiwah means thank you, I love you. Until next time in Oneida, sitting up nice and tall, taking the deepest breath of love you've had all day. Breathe in some love. Exhale some love. I love you. You are worthy of love. Nobody loves you. I love you. I hope you're doing well. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Nakiwah. Until next time.